crazy talk. No one in the United States should be retiring at 65 years old. Frankly, I think retirement itself is a stupid idea unless you have some sort of health problem. It's totally insane.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Ben Shapiro's crusade against retirement. A pretty wild thing to do, but that's what Ben Shapiro did last week. Let's play this first. And so the first thing that happened is he made kind of an offhanded comment a little bit during a show about how retirement's bad, you shouldn't do it, and then after that, obviously there's a big pushback on social media, and so he did a 30-minute defense of his attack on retirement. So we're going to take a look at some of his arguments, but first let's listen to the thing that kicked it off, his comments about how retirement is bad.
And let's be real about this. It's insane that we haven't raised the retirement age in the United States. It's totally crazy. Joe Biden, if that were the case, Joe Biden should not be running for president. Hey, Joe Biden is 81 years old. The retirement age in the United States at which you start to receive Social Security and you are eligible for Medicare is 65. Joe Biden has technically been eligible for Social Security and Medicare for 16 years, and he wants to continue in office until he is 86, which is 19 years past when he would be eligible for retirement. No one in the United States should be retiring at 65 years old. Frankly, I think retirement itself is a stupid idea unless you have some sort of health problem. Everybody that I know who is elderly, who has retired, is dead within 5 years. And if you talk to people who are elderly and they lose their purpose in life by losing their job and they stop working, things go to hell in a handbasket real quick. But put all of that aside, just on a fiscal level and on a logical level. When Franklin Delano Roosevelt established 65 as the retirement age, the average life expectancy in the United States was 63 years old. Today, the average life expectancy in the United States is close to 80. It's totally insane that you believe that you should be able to work from the time that you are essentially 20 to the time that you are 65, which is a 45-year period, pay in, and then you will receive Social Security benefits sufficient to support you and your family, you and your wife or whatever, for like another 20 years. That's crazy talk. That is not fiscally sustainable. The notion that if you have to raise the retirement age to 67 or 68, that everyone is going to fall apart. My parents are that age. My parents are not retired. And they shouldn't retire. It would be very bad for them to retire. By the way, it's disrespectful to people who are 67, 68, 69 years old to suggest that they are in the same shape as people who are 65 were in 1940. It's not true at all. Have you met a 65-year-old lately? 65-year-olds are not old in the United States. They're not. 68-year-olds are not old in the United States. Again, Joe Biden thinks he's not old, and that dude is running for president again, and that dude actually is old, and he's 81. I failed to see how a country in which our entire leadership class is 80 plus is telling you that we should have a retirement age of 65. It makes no sense at all.
Yeah. So, there were a few arguments there, and really all his 30-minute segment defending this, it was just elaboration on that. So I'm not going to play much from that longer defense because
I certainly couldn't take it.
Yeah.
I can't listen to that fella for very long.
There was not much else there. I did pull a little bit, not that long of a clip from the 30-minute defense. But I wanted to address a couple of things that he said there. One of the things that he said was, it's insane we haven't raised the retirement age, and Joe Biden should retire, because if we think that the retirement age should be 65, then Joe Biden should retire. And it's like, okay. Don't threaten me with a good time, right? It's, that's not a very good argument, I don't think. And I think most people would agree.
Just because the retirement age is 65 is not a demand that you retire at 65. Like, people are free to work as long as they want to.
Right.
But the reality is most people don't have a free choice when it comes to that. A lot of people don't get to retire at 65, right? A lot of people have to work much longer than that because they can't afford to retire. And then there's plenty of people who don't even make it that long, especially poor and working class people whose life expectancy is not as great as the kind of people he hangs around with.
Well, and he talks about, and I really have to question his statement that when everybody that I know who has retired is dead within 5 years. I don't know if maybe the people that he knows is just retiring a lot later, but all the people in my life that I can think of that have retired have lived, well into their 80s and are living right now well into their 80s. I mean, my granddaddy has been retired my entire life. Yes, I have never known my grandfather to be working, right? And he was 60 when I was born. I have never known him to have a job. I mean, it seems almost impossible to think that he was not working when I was little, but I was not aware of it. I wasn't aware of it, certainly, if he was. And he is, like I said, 20 years of retirement. 20 years. And he is only now, in the last 5 years or so, beginning to kind of decline in his health in a really kind of serious way, right?
Well, don't you just love it when really rich people who've never worked a real job tell you how lazy and how greedy you are and how good you have it? Don't you just love that?
Yeah, it's crazy. And my granny, she has never worked for more than like one summer. Her entire life, she has been a housewife or lived by herself without laboring, for a capital. Obviously, she does like reproductive labor and social labor and all of this kind of stuff, right? Obviously. But she's never, quote unquote, had a job for any serious amount of time. And, she has not died. My Mima, same thing. She's been retired most of the time that I've known her. Every now and then she'll take a job for a little bit to make a little extra money, and then she'll quit within a year or something like that, right? She's been retired basically all that I've known her. All three of my grandparents have been basically retired my entire life, and they're all doing fine. And now one of the reasons that he says retirement is a bad idea is because, and there is some evidence to his point, is that, people lose purpose or people don't have a purpose. And that is a problem of society that does not have to be fixed by forcing people to labor for a capitalist into their 80s.
Exactly.
Exactly. My grandparents have purpose. My granddaddy is a preacher. He's never made money from being a preacher. Right? He was like an architect or something for his career, but he's been a preacher for 30 years. Okay. And so that gives him purpose. My Mima, his wife, is a preacher's wife. So they do a lot of the preacher stuff together, right? My granny, very involved in her church, very involved in her family. She calls her sisters and her brothers every single day. They talk to each other and they do all this stuff that you do not have to labor for a capitalist to have meaning in your life. And it is an indictment on our society that it is difficult for people to find meaning outside of labor, and we should do everything we can to be building up social institutions that are in fact degrading in our modern world to make sure that people can have purpose outside of work and outside of labor, because that is going to actually be much more meaningful. Because yes, it's true, maybe you can derive, and some people love work, and bless them, and they can work until they're 80 if they want. But we shouldn't prescribe work as a way to stave off depression. Instead, we should find, for people who don't love their work, we should allow people to retire and to have institutions that they can slot into or they can expand their participation in to have meaning in their life. Like unions, for example. Retiree clubs in unions, retiree chapters, retiree locals are huge meaning-making institutions for so many people that, again, because of the onslaught from the likes of Ben Shapiro and his friends and his donors, these institutions are being decimated. The church is another institution that, for all the ills of the church, did provide people with meaning. And it would not be bad to have to have re-engagement in religion among people in the United States. That would not be bad. I would not be opposed to that. I think it would probably be good for people as far as it goes. And, third place is there's so much that we can do to build up meaning-making capacity in our society beyond work. And we should do that because that would make for a better life for people. Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Well, Jacob, I mean, that sounds like snowflake talk because you're talking about like, hey, maybe you could spend time with your grandkids. Maybe you could have enriching hobbies and deepen relationships. But, instead of that, you could be creating surplus value. you could be making numbers go up on the screen.
Yeah.
And so, you know, just putting it out there, as I think Ben is just being honest on it.
Right.
I actually appreciate that about this little bit of his. He's kind of, you know, just being straight up about the contempt for ordinary people, and you know, the real like way in which they look down on folks. We all deserve to retire with dignity, like just flat out. Doesn't matter who you are, what you do for a living, what you have done for a living. We all deserve a dignified retirement. If anything, we should be lowering the retirement age. We should be increasing Social Security benefits for folks.
Exactly.
And there's a reason why our building trades unions fight so hard to have good pensions, because there's a lot of jobs you just can't do for 40 years, right? Some jobs are really tough on your body. Some jobs are really tough on your mind. Whatever the situation may be, people deserve, you know, after laboring for years of their life, to live a decent retirement. Like that's not asking a lot. And, you know, it's pretty revealing to put that out there, but, you know, that is the reality that they embrace. That, I mean, that's not for them, right? Like that's not really for them. They're already semi-retired, right? They already live like retirees in the sense that they don't necessarily have to report to a boss. And, except they have unlimited incomes and they have unlimited wealth, and so they can do whatever they want, but they expect the rest of us to work till the day we drop, and you know, that's not acceptable.
Exactly. Another thing that he mentions is life expectancy. He says when it was passed when Social Security was passed, life expectancy was 60, and now it's like 80 something. And that is a bit too clever by half, because while that is technically true, adults, the life expectancy for an adult in the time that Social Security was passed was not actually that much less than life expectancy today. Life expectancy for an adult when Social Security was passed was in the 70s, right? So it was less than it is today, but not by nearly as much as Ben Shapiro is trying to make it seem to bolster his argument. And so, you know, by the time that you get to be an adult, that's actually the time that you're going to be contributing to the Social Security system. And in fact, but, you know, before you're 18, you're actually, you know, a net drain on society. You are taking resources without producing anything, right? And so that is where the life expectancy drop, or you know, the degree to which it was less back then. In large part, it was infant mortality, people dying when they were kids, stuff like this, rather than, you know, adults living shorter lives. That's not really exactly what was happening. Infant mortality was the big thing. So, you know, the final argument is he's saying, you know, that this would bankrupt the country, continuing to have the retirement age at the age that it is, would bankrupt the country. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the program, but this is going to be a separate segment when we clip it. So we're going to go over it again, just to reiterate how stupid this argument is. But let's hear it first.
The problem with that is that, of course, they're all going to go bankrupt. So politicians obviously have an incentive to keep kicking the can down the road and pretending that we have unlimited borrowing power and limited money to pay for a ballooning public debt. That, of course, is their incentive structure. But I'm not running for office, so I can tell you the truth, which is that if we don't raise the retirement age or privatize Social Security over time or make any changes to Social Security, we will go insolvent.
Yeah, it's kind of true. If we do not, you know, he says if we don't make cuts, if we don't make cuts, if we don't privatize, if we don't make any changes, then we're gonna go insolvent. And it's like, oh well, what was that third option, Ben? What was the third thing that you said really quietly and really quickly, even more quickly than the rest of your sentence? If we don't make any changes, what does that mean? That means that there are other things that you could do to prevent Social Security from going insolvent, like raising the Social Security cap. Right now, you only pay Social Security, and I was thinking earlier in the program it was $250,000. Somebody dropped in the chat that it's actually $168,000. You only pay Social Security on your first $168,000. Every dollar you make after that is free from the Social Security and Medicare tax, right? So you have millionaires, people who make $1 million a year, 90% of their income is not taxed for Social Security. It's absolutely ludicrous. If all we did was eliminate the Social Security cap, if that's all we did, and we just had what conservatives in other situations love, a flat tax for Social Security and Medicare, if we just had a flat tax on Social Security and Medicare for all income levels, we would be able to fund Social Security and Medicare for 80 years, for nearly a century, if all we did is have millionaires and billionaires pay the same rate into Social Security and Medicare that you do. That's all it would take. We're not even talking yet about progressive taxation. I mean, God forbid, if we implemented that, we could have it into eternity. But if we just eliminate the cap, it's solvent for almost a century, okay? So the idea that the only options are privatization or cuts is a lie. And they know it's a lie. And so you shouldn't fall for it. You shouldn't fall for it when conservatives and Republicans say that we have to cut Social Security and privatize it because otherwise it's going to be insolvent, because that's just not true. And then you shouldn't fall for it when they turn around out the other side of their mouth and say, I would never cut Social Security, even though I say stuff like this, like what Ben just said, even though I say stuff like Donald Trump just last week saying there are many ways that we could, in terms of cutting, many ways, many things in terms of cutting that we could do for Social Security, or when the majority of Republicans in the U.S. House every single year release a budget that includes cutting Social Security and Medicare. So don't believe them when they say we're not going to do it out of one side of their mouth, because out of the other side of their mouth, they're telling you they're going to do it. They're releasing plans on how they're going to do it. They're going to do it. You give them power, that's what they want to do. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project. And you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.